Hey everyone, welcome to TCAF 2026. I am your Festival Director, Amie Wright, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by one of our featured guests and featured publishers. So I'm going to turn it over to Liz and Mohammed. If you can briefly introduce yourselves, and we will start with a chat today.
Sure. I'm Liz Francis, and I am the publisher of Street Noise Books, which is a indie comics publisher based in Brooklyn, New York, with the aim of being unapologetic, authentic, and politically relevant. And I am the proud publisher of several books by Mohammed Saba'aneh.
I'm Mohammed Saba'aneh, a Palestinian visual artist, teach at the Arab American University, the private university here in Palestine. Been working as a political cartoonist for more than 20 years, actually, and my first comics was published by Street Noise, and this is my second one, if we can call it as a comics, not a graphic narrative or something else. This is my second graphic novel that was published by Street Noise.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for you both introducing yourself. And, Mohammed, we were really hoping that you could join us in person at this year's TCAF, but we're excited to tape this conversation so everyone can learn more about you and your work. Before we get to questions that I have for you, Mohammed, Liz, I'm just hoping we can learn a little bit more about Street Noise for folks that might be unfamiliar. So if you could just tell me a little bit more about the founding of Street Noise, when was it founded? And you touched on a little bit already, but a little bit more about why you were moved to start a publishing house.
Sure. I founded Street Noise. We officially launched in 2020. And my goal was to make books that expand your mind and open your heart with the goal of generating compassion and fostering freedom of expression and freedom of thought in a time when all of those things seem to be declining or being squelched. As I said, our mission has always been to be unapologetic, authentic, and politically relevant, and to provide a platform for the voices of marginalized people. We set out to publish books that we felt were not being published by other publishers. Um, and I was inspired by the election of Donald Trump in the first presidency. And unfortunately, the situation has gotten even more dire around the world. And I think that the need for authenticity and for truth telling and for people being brave enough to stand up and talk about their reality and not be coerced into, following what we're being spoon fed from our administration. I think that need is growing exponentially in Donald Trump's second term.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the background on Street Noise, Liz. And we are having you join us at TCAF in person later this week. So TCAF will be happening June 6th and 7th, and you will be a publisher on the floor at TCAF. Can you tell us about some of the titles that you'll be debuting and bookselling at TCAF this year?
Yes, I love TCAF. It's got such a great energy. It's one of my favorite festivals of the year. And I am thrilled to be tabling again uh, in the athletic center. It's such a cool place. And we are at table 280. So anyone who's going to be there, please come find us. We're going to be debuting Welcome to Hell, which is Mohammed's book, which is actually not officially out yet, but we will have copies for sale. Um,
Wow.
at the table, which you can see behind Mohammed, but this is it. So please, it's a beautiful, beautiful book, which we'll talk more about. Please come find me. We're also going to have Pigeons, which is by Marc Chalvin, who's a French author from Paris. And this is a fable for our times, which was translated by a Canadian translator, Laura Bourbonnais, who will be tabling with me. She'll be staffing our table. So unfortunately, Mark can't come from Paris to join us, but Laura will be there signing his amazing book. And then we'll also have a book called Ace of Hearts, Lessons in Love from an Asexual Girl by Cooklin. And I've been told by the beguiling, that book is selling really well. So we're really excited to feature that book as well. We'll have copies of our whole catalog. We now have 38 books in print. It'll be 39 with Mohammed's book coming out in a few weeks. So you can find our whole catalog. Yeah, I think that's about it.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Liz, for telling us about what to expect at Street Noise. So again, these are books that are going to be for sale at TCAF this coming weekend, June 6th and 7th. So Mohammed, we have you as a featured guest at TCAF 2026 in support of your new work published by Street Noise, Welcome to Hell from the West Bank to Gaza. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you created this book and what you were hoping to show the reader through this book?
First, to understand exactly why I've published my second comics, you should understand why exactly I published my first one, actually, which was published also by Street Noise. That one called Boer Born of a Dream. We can call it the first Palestinian comics, actually, which was published by a Palestinian artist who lives in Palestine, because we have just one comics or graphic novel that was published by Palestinian, by Layla Abdelrazik, and she's Palestinian who lives in United States, not in Palestine. In 2018, actually, that was the first time that I met Liz in Ramallah. She came here to visit and she offered me to publish comics for me. At that time, actually, I was thinking to do comics, but I had no background about comics, no knowledge. I had nothing to do about comics. I've met some great artists like Seth the Bookman, Joe Sacco in the United States years ago, but that wasn't enough or qualified me to do comics. At that time, that's why I was thinking to do my master degree in the UK and to do all of my research about the comics to enhance my knowledge about the comics. And I had that idea to illustrate my journey inside the Israeli prison by Born of a Dream, which was published by Liz. During my master degree, I improved my idea and enhanced my knowledge about the comics and how exactly I can use this medium to convey my story as a Palestinian. At the same time, I wanted to rely on political framework, which called settler colonialism, where the colonizer converted the life of the indigenous into the prisons, do this kind of fragmentation in our geography, in our people, in order to control these indigenous in Palestine. And the prison was one of these operations that the Israeli use, or methodology that the Israeli use with us as a Palestinian. Because I didn't need at that book to horrify myself and to do just all that graphic novel about Mohammed Saba'aneh, I was thinking how I can compare between the life inside the Israeli prison and outside the Israeli prison to reflect exactly how do we live in the West Bank and in Gaza. Because at that time, most of the foreigner people or outsider people who they live outside Palestine, they think that the only Gaza, it is the open air prison or the biggest open air prison on the earth. But actually, I live in the West Bank, and it is big prison. It is big prisons because each city here in the West Bank, each village, each refugees camp in the West Bank, it's surrounded by the Israeli checkpoint, Israeli wall, Israeli, all of these feature how they can control the Palestinian life by converting all of this geography into these small islands or prisons. That's why I've created that bird in that book, Born of a Dream, as a narrator, as a main narrator, to convey all of that story from outside the prison to inside the prison and make this narrative that compare between the life of the Palestinian people inside the prison and outside the prison, ending with a real story, because all of that story, there were real story about one of these child who was killed in the West Bank, and the Israeli just detained his body, his dead body, as a conclusion that all the Palestinian people inside the prison or outside the prison, even they are alive or die, they are detainees for this is settler colonialism regime. And when I finished that book, actually, and Liz published that book, and I was thinking with the beginning of the 7th of October and what's happened during the 7th of October, I couldn't find any narrative from Gaza, any narrative from the prison. Most of these people who they have mentioned in my first book, Nidal Louhedi, he was killed. We had story for him in Born of a Dream. Nidal Louhedi was killed on the 7th of October. He's a journalist, and he was killed by the Israeli. Tamer Saba'aneh, my brother, he was detained by the Israeli on the 7th of October. Maysara Barud, who I used his visual art when he created some birds to reflect or to talk about the freedom because he lives in Gaza. And he was wishing to go outside his home before the 7th of October. On the 8th of October, his home was demolished by the Israeli. And he was displaced for more than 13 times from shelter to another shelter and then evacuated to another place. And right now he is in France. He asked for asylum in France. At that time, he was wishing to go outside his home. After the 7th of October, he was wishing to have home because his home was demolished. That's why I was thinking that after the 7th of October, all the situation has been changed by the Israeli. This settler colonialism, as Patrick Wolf has said about the settler colonialism, who they used the logic of elimination instead of the logic of exploitation, they move forward to another stage. It's not just the prisons. Actually, it's not these big prisons in the West Bank and in Gaza and inside the Israeli prison. It became a biggest grave for these people who they've been killed by the Israeli. That's why I've decided that I should find the narrative to reflect the reality after the 7th of October, to reflect, because when we talk about this theoretical framework, settler colonialism rely on Patrick Wolf or Ilan Pape and all of these people who have talked about these theories, we should also do another thing because we have moved to another stage, more extreme, more aggressive, more the atrocity that we are facing in Gaza and in the West Bank and inside the Israeli prison, it's became more aggressive. When my brother was released from the prison, I was working with a scholar in Exeter University in the UK to do a academic research about the Palestinian prisoner after the 7th of October. And I did many interviews with these prisoners who they were released after the 7th of October. But I was shocked when I did that interview with my brother. Can you imagine for a Palestinian or for a human being that he has lived inside the Israeli prison for more than 1 year without glasses, because on the 8th of October, they have broken his glasses while they were torturing him. He told me about a lot of things, a lot of details that actually caused a trauma for me, not just for him. I just asked him, tell me about the prison after the 7th of October. He talked for more than 3 hours, giving me a lot of details about the life inside the Israeli prison, about how the people live inside the Israeli prison, and how the Israeli jailer actually deal with these Palestinian prisoner. And by the way, he was inside the Israeli prison under what they call it administrative detention, which means that he is inside the Israeli prison without any legal process. We can call him, he was hostage inside the Israeli prison. All these Palestinian prisoners, they are hostage. They are hostages because they are not under any law that it can justify this period of time inside the Israeli prison. That's why I've decided to do that story about the main structure for that narrative about the journey of my brother inside the Israeli prison. But when I started to illustrate that story, I found that a lot of these details, it's the same with the people in Gaza, with my friends in Gaza, actually. Akram Sorani, he's a great writer in Gaza. And Yusuf Faris, Safa Aoude, she's a comics artist. Her book was published by I've designed her book for her first book. It was published by the Lakes District Festival in the UK by Julie Tate, and now her book was translated into the 8 languages. She's a great artist, and she did her comics and her cartoon on her tent because she could not find a paper and pencils to do her art. That's why I've decided that the lack of food, how the Israeli torture the Palestinian prisoner and deal with the human being in Gaza, the lack of medical treatment inside Gaza and outside Gaza, you can find out how they attack a Shifa hospital and all of these hospitals in Gaza and inside the Israeli prison, how they treat the Palestinian prisoner without any medical treatment. It is the same mechanism, the same mentality. It did not come by coincidence. That's what we call it. That's the settler colonialism it's not an event, it's a structure. And all of this behavior and all of this treatment strategy that the settler colonialism have decided, have designed and shaped to treat these indigenous, even inside Gaza or outside Gaza, in the West Bank and outside it is the same mentality. And that's why I focus on that to do this, to compare between the life inside the prison and outside the prison, even with this book, because the stage that we are in, it's more extreme than my first comics, Born of a Dream, and it should be reflected by another comics. And we should, as a Palestinian, raise our voice by this kind of visual art because it's new for us as a Palestinian. Born of a Dream was the first Palestinian comics. Now there are some Palestinian artists, they are working on their comics by many. Initiative was organized by me in inside Palestine and outside Palestine. And I will finish with what Spivak Gayatri said, that can the subaltern talk? Yes, we can talk. And we should talk. And this is how we talk.
I mean, you raised some incredibly valid points about the critical need for these visual histories, especially when histories are happening and we don't have the books on the shelf or the knowledge or the lived experiences reflected in the literature to actually convey those experiences. So I was hoping for both Liz and Mohammed, if you could talk a little bit more about this impact of comics journalism and sort of the unique role that you think comics and graphic novels can bring to current issues by creating these visual records.
Well, I'd be happy to share that that is precisely why I decided that Street Noise, when I founded it, would be focused just on graphic novels, because I think that the images, the visual storytelling that happens in comics making and in comics journalism, in graphic memoir, is incredibly powerful. It You can't really look away. You can't ignore something when you see it right there, and especially like in the case of Mohammed's book, or in most Street Noise books are sort of firsthand accounts of people in their own life and what they've seen and what they've felt. And it's incredibly powerful when that's drawn with their own hand. You can feel viscerally, you can feel what they were feeling in those moments. And I think that's exactly the kind of compassion that is needed in the world right now, because it's so easy to do things like bomb Iran when you don't think of the effects that is happening on people on the ground, or you see it as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and you don't give thought to what does that mean? Who are these people? These are people. This isn't just about lines in the sand and policy making. It's people's lived experience. And I was blown away at first when I discovered graphic novels and nonfiction, memoir, comics journalism. Personally, I just felt that it had an incredible power that text narratives don't have in the same way. So yeah, that's my take on it. But Mohammed has his own.
Actually, I will start with a quotation from Edward Said when he has said, "Nations themselves are a narration, and we are a nation." And for many years, as a Palestinian, our voice was stolen from us. Not, by the way, not just from the occupation, and even with some political party here in Palestine, even with some Arab regimes, even with many layers of occupation that we are facing as a human being. That's why I think as a Palestinian, we should represent ourselves as a Palestinian. We should use this kind of visual art to represent our issues as a human being. For me, I do believe back to the same theoretical framework when we talk about the settler colonialism and how this colonizer want to dehumanize us as a Palestinian with the beginning of this war, of this genocide, actually, not war. It was explicitly was raised by the Israeli leader. We are fighting against human animal. We are the human animal that were mentioned by the Israeli artists and writer and visual artists and scholars. These are the human animal that Israeli leader mentioned. These are the Israeli leader, the human animal that the Israeli killed in Gaza. Safa Ode, Maysara Barud, Yusuf Faris, and all of these artists, visual artists and writer who they have created great art, not just because they are Palestinian, because they are great by doing that. Our visual discourse and art definitely will dismantle the Israeli propaganda against us that we are primitive, we are extremists, we are the human animal. This is the war against the uncivilized people, mentioning us as a Palestinian as uncivilized people. The Palestinian political cartoon, has started in 1936, before what they call the establishment of the State of Israel. Palestine has two daily newspapers before the establishment of the State of Israel. That's mean when they have occupied this land, it wasn't empty. It wasn't full with primitive people and these people without culture and without heritage. As a Palestinian, we know exactly how we can convey our story, how can we convey our narrative for all of these audience around the world, not just because we want to carry this political message, because also we want to practice this art as any human being around the world. We want to do what exactly we love, not just because we want to resist against this occupation. We are doing that because we as a human being.
Oh, that's very well put. I think we'll probably start to conclude, but I want to thank you both so much for talking with me today. I'm sure, as you may have seen, one of the things we've been really happy to spotlight with TCAF this year and last year is also the impact of graphic medicine and how comics and comics journalism can bring that human element of lived experiences, empathy, and that very unique format of bringing in multimodality of the visuals and the text. Maybe you both have seen there's been a lot of course, discussion in Canada. We have completed a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but one of the things that is still not put into practice as often as it should be is the fact that lived experiences and alternative forms of telling history, especially from the point of view of the people who have those lived experiences, are as valid and need places on the shelf. We've seen a huge uptick in censorship around the world, especially around children's reading material and around current and political news. And I think this is all part of a general erasure of pulling those books off the shelf, the lived experiences, or ensuring they never get made in the first place. So before we conclude, I just want to give it to you both. Any final points that you have for folks, whether it's about checking out a comics journalist, checking out a particular issue, or just your final thoughts on the role of comics journalism and also on your amazing new work, Mohammed, Welcome to Hell from the West Bank to Gaza. So I'll start with you, Mohammed, and then we'll go over to Liz.
First, I want to thank you and apologize that I couldn't do it and come to it could be
Yeah.
great if I be joined that, but this is exactly what the Israeli do. If you even if you want to visit Canada, you have to get the Israeli permission. That's mean you have to get visa from the Israeli, not just from the Canadian government. And as a Palestinian, we should keep just doing that, not just because we want to prove that we are a human being, because we want to practice our human being, as any people around the world. And I hope the people or the audience will like, or I hope this audience will not like my art because it's reflect very, very, very hard situation here in Palestine.
I would just like to thank you, Amy, and thank the people at TCAF for hosting us and for being brave enough to highlight Mohammed's work amongst all the other amazing work that's out there. Um, yeah, I'd like to reiterate that I think that now is the time to support these comics artists, to show your support by buying their books, and to keep the market open, because we are, unfortunately, we're run by capitalist societies, and so capitalism runs on money. And if you put your money where your mouth is and you support individual comic artists like Mohammed and like other people who are doing the incredible work of comics journalism and graphic medicine, which Street Noise has always been a big proponent of graphic medicine. And also in this Pride Month, let's listen to our LGBTQ queer folks out there and pay attention to their stories as well. And I hope everyone will, if you can't make it to TCAF, then check out our website, follow us on Instagram, sign up for our newsletter. And we're forming community across the globe in order to advocate for truth and respect and humanity for all people.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining me today. And I think, as we've talked about, people are like, oh, a comic arts festival. And I'm like, art is sort of the soul and the cultural heritage of us all. And it's so important to keep that conversation going. So thank you both for joining me today.